The problem that no one wants to publicly discuss is that something with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's children simply doesn't add up. This isn't about trivial rumors or fan fiction about the royal family. Rather, it's about birth certificates, legal irregularities, and an increasing number of questions that it all begins with an odd little element hidden in Archie's birth certificate. In the UK, as in most other countries, birth certificates are standardized and include the complete legal names of the parents. To be honest, the palace seems a little too keen to avoid this, parents for formality and legal status. But Meghan did something that virtually no other royal mother has done in Archie's case. She had her own full name taken away rather than Rachel's. Meghan Markle's certificate only identifies her as the Duchess of Sussex, Her Royal Highness. On its own, perhaps that's just a strange personal choice. Perhaps she felt it sounded more official and regal. However, 11 days after Archie was born, she had the record revised, modified, and corrected as if in the palace. Or Meghan herself thought something was. Why remove your identity from your own son's record and every other royal birth certificate? From Queen Elizabeth to the princess. It was bad enough to legally change the paperwork that moved quietly, because it raised red lights for many people who regularly follow these things. As is customary, Charlotte gives the mother's complete maiden name. Then comes Lily. Oh, Lily. Although the media has consistently reported that she was born in California, there is proof that the documentation indicates a completely different location. Although it may seem arbitrary, Colorado has various regulations regarding surrogacy, and in contrast to California, it's more accommodating when it comes to whose name is listed on the birth certificate. This is significant because one extremely odd thing about the birth certificate for Lilibet, Diana Mountbatten Windsor, that began to circulate was that it only stated Prince Harry's Royal Highness, the Duke of Sussex, as his legal name, rather than his full name, Henry Charles Albert David, technically incorrect in the US. Birth certificates are legal papers that serve as the basis for citizenship, custody, inheritance rights, and more. For this reason, they may potentially nullify the certificate's legal strength. Furthermore, according to US law, a title has no bearing whatsoever. You cannot enter a passport or DMV office and declare that you are someone's father by stating, "Oh yeah, I'm the Duke of Sussex." I will request your true legal name. No title, no fluff. The simplest explanation is ignorance, which is the most practical tactic, since if Harry's legal name isn't on the certificate, he might not have any legal protection. Therefore, why did Harry and Meghan file a certificate that showed his title instead of his legal name? Parental rights over Lily in the US, and Meghan is aware that while some people think it was an accident, others think it was intentional, particularly since she retained her entire name on Lily's certificate, in contrast to what she did with Archie. One lacks a mother's name, and the other lacks a father's name, which seems to plan to be a coincidence. This leads us to the most surprising development in all the surrogate rumors. There is growing speculation that the genuine lady who gave birth to Lily isn't Meghan, a 23-year-old Colorado woman whose identity hasn't been made public. Allegedly the surrogate. The timing, the place, and the legal documents all seem to fit together just right to rule out that alleged surrogate. Although it hasn't made the news yet, people with knowledge of the case have alluded to a young woman who gave birth in Colorado in early June 2021, just a few days before Libet's official birth date. She allegedly signed stringent non-disclosure agreements and hasn't been contacted since it got even stranger when you consider that, in contrast to California, where the surrogate's name typically appears on the initial, Colorado's legal structure makes it quite simple to assign parental rights directly to the intended parents on a birth certificate without ever identifying the surrogate. Documentation, not to mention Meghan's purported health tale, in which she publicly claimed to suffer from postpartum depression. Colorado law favors anonymity in these arrangements, which may explain why the names that aren't there matter just as much as the ones that are. According to podcast, preeclampsia is one of the most serious consequences of childbirth. This condition typically necessitates strict bed rest, medical care, and lengthy hospital stays, but strangely enough, it generally occurs around the same time. Lily was created when Meghan was discovered. There was no obvious evidence of her recovery and no protective measures in place. A few weeks later, Prince Harry was seen playing polo in Aspen, Colorado, looking happy and healthy. Would a guy whose wife almost died during labor be taking pictures and swinging mallets while racing across fields? The supposed birth certificate itself isn't consistent with the story. So let's examine it. It wasn't a fully recognized U.S. birth certificate. Rather, it was a certificate of live birth that hospitals issued to verify that a kid was born alive. Although that document is useful for starting formal documentation, it is not the final birth record. The state issues the final birth certificate. Therefore, why hasn't an official copy of Lily's complete California birth certificate ever surfaced, since the media only receives the draft version? There is potential that the final version was never made public or does not exist under the same conditions, which raises still another dubious possibility. If Harry's legal name is not listed on the certificate, he'd be regarded by U.S. courts as Lily's legal stranger. The man essentially has no legal authority in an emergency. No parental rights, no custody claims, and only a title. And titles aren't recognized in American courts. So if this was all simply a mistake in the paperwork, why hasn't it been fixed over the years? Because it would only require an official amendment filing. Seems as if they don't want it fixed. And Archie's case adds even more uncertainty. Meghan's, in retrospect, it is strange that she abruptly removed her full name from his UK birth certificate. Could this have been a planned move to distance herself from parental papers in the event of future legal disputes? Typically, a mother adds her maiden name on offer legal standing and clarity. But Meghan deleted hers, leaving only her title. When questioned about it later, she said the palace had her make the change. If that's the case, the next reasonable question is why the palace would want her identity removed from her records. Firstborn child, these are not insignificant details. We are discussing official birth certificates, the type of records that establish succession lines and inheritance, rights, legal parenting, but the paperwork for both children appears to have been set up to be legally unclear. Almost as though each parent only partially owns one child and not the other. What sort of family structure allows that to happen? Unless they're concealing something significant, something more profound than a typo or a title. And then there's the twist that makes someone with knowledge of the situation claims that everything has descended into complete madness. Lee and Prince Harry may be more than just legally separated. There is already substantial conjecture that he may not even be Lily's biological father. Seems absurd on the surface, but according to Harry's medical history, he supposedly experienced a hernia issue as a toddler purportedly implicated one of his testicles. Although the palace has never acknowledged this, the rumor has persisted in if that issue had an impact on his fertility. It would explain why surrogacy was even considered in the first place, and why Meghan might have relied on egg and sperm donors instead of their own genetic material. This is the backdrop of royal rumors for decades. The concept isn't merely conjecture. It's legally significant in the U.S. in the event that Harry failed to provide his DNA and to include his legal name on the birth certificate, he would have lost all of his parental legitimacy's foundations. Meghan, however, used her entire legal identity to obtain her place on Lily's documents. If a divorce were to occur, Harry would not only have to fight for custody, but he would also have no acknowledged parental claim at all. And he could be legally removed from her life with the stroke of a pen. And perhaps that was the original intention. Meghan appears to be more outwardly affectionate and emotionally committed in Leet than Archie, which is even weirder, according to observers. There is conjecture that could be due to Leet's biology. Its biology was conceived using a surrogate. But since it was made from Meghan's own eggs and those of another donor, Archie would still be her biological kid. However, this could also explain why Meghan supposedly emotionally distanced herself from her son, but clings to her daughter. Although it may sound chilly, there is a discernible difference in the way she talks about them, how she portrays them to the public, and even how she includes them in her media appearances. Let's discuss the timeline as well. Meghan stated that she miscarried in July 2020 and she was observed. Soon after, they went to what many thought was a dental office. Although this Beverly Hills facility is also renowned for providing upscale reproductive procedures. According to a source, Meghan's bag that day even looked like a cold pack that's frequently used after an egg techniques for retrieval. If she had actually experienced a devastating miscarriage, her brief public appearance and manner did not reflect the seriousness of the allegation. The purported birth video of Lilith, which Meghan attempted to market, also raised questions about how contrived the appearance was. The eyebrows, there were no indications of pandemic limitations, which were strictly enforced at the alleged time of delivery in California hospitals. Although masks were required and partners were frequently barred from sharing a room, the film reveals none. The hospital in question had said that visits were strictly regulated during that time. So, how was Meghan, a public figure, excluded from that? There were no masks or medical restrictions, simply a neat, softly lighted setting that appeared more like a staged photo session than a hospital recollection. Every thread from those guidelines links to the next, and they all pull in the same manner towards a meticulously managed and controlled story that is constantly shifting, evading, and morphing as new issues arise. Whether it's the odd omissions on court documents, the inconsistent health reports, or strangely timed public appearances, all lead to a larger truth that is concealed in plain sight. When that truth is revealed, whatever it is, it will not only be a royal family issue, but a worldwide one. Considering that when your kids sit, your secrets in the line of succession turn into ever